Genesis 9:4. But flesh with me life of it, flesh of me with life of it, which is the blood of it, ye shall not eat. Life is sacred, life is precious. That's why he commands us not to eat blood, or not to eat living things, because God holds them dear. Okay, life is sacred. John. Ten, 8, 10 through 14. John 8, 10 through 14. Yea, though we have hired among you the nations, now will I gather them, and they shall sorrow a little for the burden of the king and princes. It's a Hosea 8, my mistake. You know, what they did, they, instead of going to God, they went to other nations. They told them they'd give them this and give them that, and they pretty much gave up what little they had left and caused themselves a big burden. Instead of going to the Lord, they decided to take care of the problem themselves, and it caused a bigger problem for them because they were left with nothing because God took what they had because of them not following Him. What they had left, they gave away. That was abuse, they gave away. So they're pretty much left with nothing and became burdened because then they had to fully rely on worldly people. The problem is if we rely on worldly people, we are not relying on God. They could have just went to God, and God would have took care of it and wouldn't have been burdened by their decision later. Verse 11, because Ephraim has made many altars to sin, altars shall be unto him to sin. What it's saying is there was false worship, much false worship. They had altars to idols, and this was frequently done. There wasn't no altars very to God built here. Nobody we see there's a remnant that worship God, but most up there of God's people in the north, Israel, did not serve God. They served idols. I have written to him the great things of my law, but they were counted as strange things. Okay, this shows that a generation brought up ignored God's law, didn't listen to God's law, didn't follow God's law, and the next generation wasn't taught God's law. So generation after generation, you eventually get to the point where God's people don't even know of God's law because they're not taught it, they're not mentioned it isn't brought up. They know the worldly things. As Christians, we're bringing up those around us, our families, with the Bible, whether they reject it later on, or to bring them up in that. That way it isn't strange to them when they hear it. They're familiar with it. Verse 13. They sacrifice flesh for the sacrifices of mine offering, and eat it, but the Lord accepts them not. So there was sacrifice done. They probably went down to the temple to do this, perhaps. But the Lord accepts them not. Now will I remember their iniquity and visit their sins. They shall return to Egypt. But what it's saying is they're going to return to bondage. They didn't actually go back to Egypt. They were put under bondage, though. They were bound and became servants of Assyria, became slaves because of their sins, because of their false worship. When our heart isn't right, it doesn't matter how much we offer up to the Lord. They gave offerings to the Lord. They gave sacrifices to the Lord, but it wasn't heartfelt. It wasn't an act of worship, so it wasn't recognized. The acts of worship they were doing were to pagan gods. They were just doing this out of traditions. And it says they didn't know the laws, so most likely they weren't offering up what they were supposed to begin with. They were just doing this as a custom. For Israel has forgotten his master and builds temples, and Judah has multiplied fenced cities. But I will send fire upon his cities, and it shall devour the palaces thereof. Forgotten. Israel had forgotten what the Lord had done for them, and they were building pagan temples and serving pagan gods. And Judah was putting their reliance in themselves and getting very prideful. Judah's pride would be broken, and a remnant would come back to God. You know, oftentimes we build up fences, and oftentimes these fences aren't for the better. They worsen us. Oftentimes we put things before God. We sacrifice things, our time with Him often, when that should be the last thing we sacrifice, is our time to Him, our service to Him. But that's oftentimes what we put aside first, is Him. And when we're doing that, we're putting something in front of Him. We're serving something else instead of Him when we do that. And we're doing the same thing Israel did.